Well, welcome back to Wednesday in our life of Jesus and studying the Passion or the Holy Week, as some of us call it. And, coming off a Tuesday on Jesus' day that he just taught so much, Wednesday passes by pretty quietly. There's not a lot written about Wednesday, and it really, when you compare it to the rest of the days that we have looked at and the ones that we're going to look at here in the next couple of days, Wednesday's pretty quiet. In Luke's account, it tells us that the attention of the crowds, though, by this time in the week had begun to mount. That people were beginning to catch on to this movement that Jesus was starting and what was happening in the life of the disciples as well as Jesus. And the reality is that Jesus had become somewhat of a celebrity by this point. And he's teaching in the temple, John tells us, every day. And the religious leaders at this point knew that they were in a tough spot. You see, they didn't want the masses of people revolting and responding largely to them taking Jesus, but they knew that the religious leaders knew they had to do something with Jesus and that they were going to have to end this before it began a large movement that would even get back to Rome and cause some of the authority of the religious leaders to lose the power that Rome had granted them as long as they were good believers and just remaining quiet. So it's on this day of Wednesday that the religious leaders made the decision to wait until the Feast of Unleavened Bread was over, which we would probably call a little more Passover, but it was a feast that went a little longer. And they would wait until Thursday to arrest Jesus, to take Jesus on his blasphemous words. In fact, let me read you Matthew chapter 26, verse 1 through 5. It says, when Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Now, it's an unfortunate chapter break here because starting in verse 3 is where we pick up the events for Wednesday. It says this, "Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas. And they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or there might be a riot amongst the people." You see, they hoped that most of the people would return home after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then they could arrest Jesus and get rid of this thorn in their flesh, keeping the attention to a minimum, if you would. But this is not the only thing that happened, because not only are the high priests are about to plan to betray Jesus, also Judas does. Luke chapter 22, verses 1 through 6 says this happened on Wednesday. Now the Festival of Unleavened Bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. And then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and discussed with them how they might betray Jesus. And they were delighted and agreed to give him money. And Judas consented and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when there was no crowd present. You see, I think like every other day, if we were to assume that there's a theme to Wednesday, I think we would have to assume that the theme for Wednesday is just betrayal. And I want you to notice something about Judas as well as about the religious leaders on this Wednesday. You see, they made the decision in advance to betray Jesus. And let me just speak to that just for a minute, because there's a couple thoughts that just stuck out to me in my mind, and that is most of the thoughts and most of the times that we betray Jesus are premeditated. Most of the time we don't slip into the mode of not giving Jesus glory. We don't slip into the mode of not living a life that honors Jesus. The reality is we made that decision way back, but now is just the time that we can actually walk out that decision. I remember when I was a student pastor talking a lot to parents about what happens to kids when they go off to college, but I've got news for you. The decisions that most people make in college are not college decisions. They're decisions they made when they were 16 years old. They just didn't have the freedom to act them out. There's a truth in that, and that's that many of us have made decisions already to walk away from Jesus. But here's what I want to encourage you with today. There's time to turn from that. There's time to realize and learn from these disciples and learn from Judas and learn from the high priest and learn from the religious leaders that all Jesus wants us to do is to turn away from our sin and turn back to Him and to give Jesus every piece of our hearts. So let me ask you a question this week. It's pretty personal. Is there decisions that you have already made in your heart that you haven't acted out on yet when it comes to Jesus? Have you already decided whenever you get the chance, that's when you'll walk away? That's when you'll quit? Fill in the blank for your life. Because here's what I want to encourage you with this week, especially this Passion Week, that Jesus wants to forgive you of that decision, and He wants to set you on such a different path of forgiveness, of hope, and of Him being Lord. God bless you guys today. See you tomorrow.